Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. When the sun goes down and the moon comes up, Valley will roll. Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. When the sun goes down and the moon comes up, Valley will roll.
Our first presentation is to Professor Ed Leslie. He loves Missouri Valley College. Charles Ed Leslie graduated from Missouri Valley College in 1961 with an ABS in mathematics. He is famous for driving his 1929 Model A Henrietta. Ed was a key organizer and participant in the first torch run. As a student at MVC, Ed was vice president of the student body, president of the senior class, president of the independent men's organization, vice president of V Club, and was in Who's Who among students in America.
I've been president of Missouri Valley College for 11 years. I've been here for 15. I was the academic dean for 4 years before I became president. I believe we stand for providing a great educational opportunity to a very diverse student body. And our mission is guiding students to succeed through personal instruction and intellectual inquiry. And in layman's terms, that just means we get really close with our kids. We have a small student body. We know who our kids are. We work hard to help them work independently and prepare their own lives for success. And we do that through curricular work in the classrooms, and we do it through organizations and teams and clubs. And we do that by knowing who our kids are.
It's the people, you know, whether it's faculty, staff, or students. 25 years, there's lots of connections and lots of memories.
Well, you know, Missouri Valley is one of the oldest schools west of the Mississippi. Great tradition. They've been putting out, you know, quality student athletes for as long as anybody. And I think that's the big thing. It's getting young people together and getting them an education and getting them prepared to go out into the world and be successful. And that's what college education is about. And Missouri Valley's been right there as long as anybody doing that.
Probably some of the same things that you've heard from other people, the peaceful environment, the small environment, getting to know our kids, and we always refer to our students as our kids, one-on-one, adopting some through Adoptive Viking program, just that it felt more like a family than a college campus. And Valley just had such a unique environment, ambiance?
I love Missouri Valley. Both my kids went to school here, and they have lifelong friends from here. I think what I like about it is exactly what I explained a minute ago. It's a very small, personalized campus. We have great instructors. They do a lot of tremendous work in the classroom, but I think their most important work is in the hallway or the lunchroom when they're connecting with kids. I think we give kids an opportunity to be successful right from the first day they walk on campus. And I think that's a little bit unusual today.
It depends on what time of year you come through. In the spring, when all the trees are budding and the flowers are blooming. So the spring is a time of rebirth and excitement for the students and the faculty, because we have a new crop of kids coming in. In the winter, it's a whole different thing. I remember standing on the patio at Ferguson Center, and we just had an ice storm, and just listening to the silence, and the only thing that broke the silence was the creaking of the limbs on the trees as the ice bent them under the weight of it. And just a feeling of inclusiveness, like being part of something bigger than yourself, yet being part of a family.
I would say that we're kind of like a team. You know, like everyone has their different teams, but we all kind of come together. You can especially tell that during sporting events because everyone comes and supports each other. I think that Missouri Valley is just very sports oriented.
It's just quaint and kind of rustic feeling, and just kind of when you're walking down the cobblestones and have the wind blowing through the trees that line the cobblestones, it just gives you a feeling of serenity and kind of just being home and feeling like you belong someplace.
What does the word tradition mean to you?
It's an act or a thought or a philosophy that's carried down through generations.
That there has to be people and there has to be special places and special ideas and things that I think build anything into a tradition. And so the tradition is formed through people meeting other people and forming relationships and forming things that we do and do together.
Well, obviously, if you've talked to other people, the torch run obviously is the one that most people will point out first.
We talk about tradition. I think one of the neatest things that we have done here at Missouri Valley, and it's been for 50 years, is the tradition of the homecoming torch run, for example. I mean, that's one of those things that I think is one of the neatest thing, and that, you know, we physically run a torch from our opponent's campus to home. Now, the tradition may have been adjusted a little bit in the recent past just with the changes and all that, but every year there's been a torch that's been run and light the bonfire for the pep rally the night before homecoming, and that's something, like I said, for 50 years in a row, and I think that's such a neat thing.
We've changed some traditions over the years, but the torch run continues to be one of those special ones. You know, there's other things that are out there that, you you know, that the college community does, whether that's hanging of the greens and different things like that. But most of the things that happen over homecoming, the parade, the torch run, those kind of things are the ones that I kind of tend to like.
I think the torch run is a great example of a tradition. And that's a tradition that I believe started in the 60s, early 60s. And I might have the date wrong, but Professor Ed Leslie started that with some other members of his class and people that worked here, coaches and so forth, and they started running the torch from the place we were playing football at the homecoming game back to our campus. And that has endured for years.
Ed decided that it was something that needed to be a Valley tradition. So they did it every year. And again, would go to the opposing team's hometown and run it in, again in relay fashion, in time to meet with the bonfire, which always took place on Friday night after the one of the big banquets during homecoming, and they would use the torch to light the bonfire and then have a big pep rally.
Next is Mr. Derek Leeper, Exercise Science.
Oh, the Scholar Banquet's a fun banquet too. That has been going on for maybe about 9 or 10 years. And I think that's a great program to honor the kids in the spring that are the top in their different disciplines. I think everybody looks forward to it. Sometimes parents get to come if they live close enough, but the professors, and it goes back to what I mentioned before about the best work they do, I think, is connecting with that student. You know, the professors are as proud of those kids as their own parents would be at the Scholar Banquet.
They wanted something special, something really that would honor a special student, and 1 out of 1,000,000, not 100 out of 150 getting, you know, they wanted it to where it was an elite group, and it was a very special honor for a student to walk out of here with that.
The Ed Leslie Lamp of Knowledge Award, where we would have all of the scholars, anywhere from 22 to 26, have them write an essay, what Missouri Valley College means to me. And then he would review them and choose which had the greatest substance. From that, he said, I want to give the outstanding winner of that a trophy, a $100 check, a framed print of their essay, and the most unique thing was a medallion. But only one is given a year, and that student wears the medallion at graduation, and everybody knows what it stands for, and it's a very cool thing, and we've done it every year since.
He plans to work in television or social media and then attend graduate school in Chicago.
Today my guests are my awesome parents, Anna and Greg Lorenz.
We have the winningest program in the NAI in the nation. And football is a long-standing pillar of pride at this school. At one point, we had one of the longest winning streaks of any level football in the country. And it was in 1941 to 40 to 42 maybe. They were undefeated. And it didn't matter what division you were, that was one of the longest standing winning streaks of anyone. I was at Notre Dame, when South Bend, Indiana, when our football coach was inducted into the National Football Coaches Hall of Fame. And that was Volney Ashford, who was coach at that time, longtime coach here. The stadium is Volney Ashford Stadium.
Well, as a football coach, I mean, the tradition in football obviously is a big plus for me. I mean, that's the thing that I like. It's fun to talk to recruits and parents and talk to them about we are the all-time winningest football program in the NAIA. That's something that's taken, like I said, a lot of years to accumulate those victories. So certainly it was a lot to do with the players and coaches that were here before, our current staff and current team, but we want to continue to add to that tradition. That was what initially attracted me to here is the tradition they have in football. Valley's always had good football teams going back decade after decade. So as a football coach, you want to be in a place where you have a chance to be successful, and certainly that was one of the things that we've been trying to keep going. The changes I've seen in my 15 years here, I mean, just the upgrade to the stadium, the renovations they've made, it just is a much more attractive facility. Adding turf certainly helped, but the other things around it, adding the tailgating has been a big part of the atmosphere, with just a place for family and fans and to come out and to barbecue or eat some food and then walk across the street to the game. I think is a great thing for the environment of the game day experience.
Valley football is a tradition. More wins than any other NAIA program. Every time we take the field, or the Vikings take the field, the other team knows that's a game that they've penciled in on their schedule. They really want to play well and win. When we go on the road, we get big crowds because of that. At home, the community supports it. Great student support, wonderful student support for football in the fall. It's just fun to be there.
Low tonight, Valley Willow. Valley Willow tonight, Valley Willow. Valley Willow tonight, Valley Willow.
Pop Ferguson was, he was kind of like the Mr. Viking, okay? He was the guy that helped establish a lot of types of traditions. I mean, they came from his era. He was a coach here, he was an instructor here, he was a mentor of hundreds of people, and indirectly and directly, because if he didn't touch your life personally, then he touched someone's life that is touching your life, later on as a Viking.
Pop Ferguson is a legendary figure here, and there's all kinds of stories about him that you hear from different alums, older alums. I met with an older lady several years ago, and she told me his name was Red Blood. That was his nickname, because he was tough. And he was a math instructor. A lot of students that are, older generation now that had him as an instructor have talked about how he helped them develop very critical thinking skills, and how he could talk them through problems and they would look at them and say, now is this reasonable or is this unreasonable? And that he really was either black or white. There was no gray for him. You either did the work, you did it the way he wanted it, or you did it wrong. And so the expectation for excellence was a standard that he set years and years ago that is still storied among graduates of that era.
Pop Ferguson was a constant and a mainstay. He was one of the best math faculty that they had ever had. And while I never met him, the stories of him abound. And certainly to have a building named after you, it is a big deal. So he was extremely well thought of and respected.
Well, you can't be on this campus for very long and not see his name around. I mean, the Ferguson Center is named after Pop Ferguson. I never met him, but just, you know, I've talked to a lot of people that knew him, and what a great influence he was on their lives, and the type of man that he was. And I mean, you look around, there's lots of reminders around campus about him. Tremendous individual. Would have loved to have sat down and talked with him. But yeah, for some of the alums who graduated years ago when he was here, that's one of their most vivid memories, is listening to them talk about Pop Ferguson stories.
Pop Ferguson was someone very much like Ed Leslie. He was an instructor here that was a valuable employee that loved athletics. You know, I think he was an assistant coach. And so, you know, when you talk about Pop Ferguson, you talk about a loyal Valley supporter, you know, academically and athletically.
Pop Ferguson was a long-standing member of the Valley community, and kind of, you know, his deal was the thumbs up, you know. So there's stories about Pop, about how he was still very active late into his, you know, I mean, he actually worked here for I don't know how many years, 50 plus years, but he was still very active late into his career and doing push-ups in the middle of campus when he was in his 80s, you know, so just pretty gregarious guy.
You know, I mean, there were pictures of him. There were, everybody always gave the thumbs up while I was there, and that was the insignia that, you know, that we still were tied to him spiritually.
But boy, he would get that thumb up, and he would give you that Pop's pride and joy of Valley, and you knew right where he was thinking. He was still right there.
His deal was always showing the thumbs up, like it's always, you know, it's a great day to be a Viking, and so those are just a couple of the things that I've heard. And you know, there's one of his fedora, his hat, is bronzed up, and I believe it's up in the formal dining lounge in the case. So, you know, that's, a lot of people don't know what that is, you know, or why it's there or anything, but that's, you know, that's one of the mementos from, you know, from his time.
Pop would go out on the football field, and every morning he'd walk around the football field, and then he'd do a couple of push-ups, and, you know, a guy in his 80s, that's pretty good. And then he always told everybody that if the good Lord meant for you to smoke, your nose would be turned up the other way, like a chimney. He always put that on us, harped on that on us.
I'm not sure quite why he did the push-ups. I don't know whether that was just a motivation factor, you know, for the young people, because he was very, I believe him from what I understand, you know, he was kind of a taskmaster, and believe him to be, you know, interested in fitness, and he prided himself that he could still maybe hang with the young kids, you know, and do some of those things. And so I don't know why or how often he did it. I just heard those same stories, that's, you know, that was part of one of his thing. He would get out and show the kids that they could do the push-ups.
As a math instructor in my freshman, sophomore, and junior years, and Ed and I were never in the same class together. But I know he idolized Pop, and he just wanted to be like Pop Ferguson, you know, when he got to teaching, and especially when he was here at Valley teaching. He really enjoyed doing that, and I think he did a very good job at it, and really liked it.
He was just always such a big figure on campus, and of course people nowadays who don't know Pop but know of him refer to Dad as the modern day Pop, and he was just, I envision that he was a lot like my dad was almost 100 years ago.
I don't really, you know, I don't know much of anything about him other than he's kind of a legend at Valley, and my dad always had wonderful things to say about him. I've heard kids say, your dad's the modern day Pop Ferguson. And that would always make me smile, because I know what people thought of Pop Ferguson. And so, I mean, that's a pretty big compliment to give someone.
You know, Ed Leslie, again, you know, there's no one on campus that embodies the Viking spirit more than him. I mean, I think if you cut open his arm, he would bleed purple and orange. I mean, he is just that kind of guy and always has been. He is the one more than anyone else that used to tell me Pop Ferguson stories and things that he remembered about Pop Ferguson, and I could tell from the way he talked about him. And again, you know, Pop Ferguson was a great man and was a true Viking. And you could tell the way he talked about him that meant a lot to him, and he wanted to also represent those same qualities. And I think to this, you know, the current generation of Valley students, I think he is the Pop Ferguson for this generation. I think if you ask them, many of the students have had him in class. They all know of him because of being a supporter and being there. I think he embodies all that.
A big part of it was my association with Pop Ferguson, who taught mathematics. He's the one for whom the building of the Ferguson Center is named. As I said, I took all my math courses from him. He was my mentor. He was a big reason why I wanted to stay at Valley.
Pop took Ed under his wing, and he saw Ed's brilliance and his talent, and he wanted to share everything he could with him, gave him textbooks, and always encouraged him in everything that he did. And they were just extremely close, which is part of what we continue to see today with faculty relationships with students.
Yeah, I think he would take this as a compliment, but I do think he is this generation's Pop Ferguson.
Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. When the sun goes down, the moon comes up, Valley will roll. Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll.
Please join us at the podium, and I'd ask Dr. Paris Watts, Vice President of Academic Affairs, to join me for this honorary doctorate as well. Our first presentation is to Professor Ed Leslie. There we go, right there.
He became fully immersed in all the college activities. He was an honor student, and he ran track and cross country. He was the manager of the football team. He was involved in the Math Honor Society, Sigma Zeta, as a member, and he always went on their conventions. Of course, he started the torch run, and we've talked a lot about that. He was vice president of the V Club, and you had to be a letterman to do that. The Norsemen was a singing group on campus that started in 1960, and he sang along with them. They produced a tape of several Valley songs plus old-timey music that the guys like to get together and sing. And there was an independent men's club, and he was the president of that from Young Hall. He was on the executive council for the student senate, and anytime anybody needed anything, he jumped right in and was glad to help.
Ed Leslie, like I said, you can't put in words what he means to Missouri Valley, and especially athletics. Ed and I have been friends for, like I said, since I got here 25 years ago.
Ed is my younger brother by about 23 months. And his birthday's in December, mine's in January. He is really old now. He's 76 and I'm 78.
Like, what is the most valued thing he's done?
Build relationships, hands down. He has been a teacher for such a long time before his retirement and had impacted in a positive way so many kids in the classroom. And then, as I mentioned earlier, he went to an enormous number of events. And the kids would see him, and he would always know them. He would always talk to them. You know, he had a lot of kids at his house off and on over the years. He had a big pool in his backyard in the house that they own now, and another one in the previous house. And he'd have kids over swimming, kids that needed help. You know, he would meet them anytime they needed to work on campus, on coursework, and he's just one of those guys that did. Just an enormous amount of relationship building that you don't really see, but you feel as those people graduate and leave, they remembered him.
I think he's like the picture of Missouri Valley College because he loves it. Like, he bleeds orange and purple, you can tell.
He really means a lot. I know you can just tell by how everyone talks about him. He was an awesome person. He was just so smart, oh my gosh. He would write things, you know, so fast, but I just understood, like, how he understood it, and I think that was my best memory of him. And my daughter, or his daughter, has the same name as me, and he came up and talked to me about that for a while. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, one thing about my dad and the way he taught, it was like you said, even if you weren't good at math, he explained it in a way that anybody could understand it.
The legend. He had become a legend. And students would tell other kids, you have to take your math classes from Professor Leslie, he's the best. I think it was mentioned before, he could teach math to a rock. If you didn't get it, he'd figure out a way so that you did understand. And just the infinite patience. Never got upset. There was never anything like a stupid question. He just continued to pour everything that he had into his kids to make their lives better for having known him and been under his tutelage.
He just had such pride in Valley that you felt like, you know, I don't know, he's been here for so long, and he's been, you know, teachers have been students of his here, and he just embodies like Valley, like, you know, he is so prideful of Valley. He was at every sporting event. He, like I said, would encourage you in class, say good game, even when it wasn't your best, and I would see him at every basketball game announcing, and that was just his thing, is to, like, he was Valley, you know?
Well, you would say free spirit, but I would say he was by the book, but at the same time, he was also very knowledgeable of what he was talking about, but at the same time, he taught it to the point that the kids understood. Some teachers kind of teach a class that they would think they would understand instead of teaching how kids understand. He taught how kids understand, so.
He was Mr. Viking, in my opinion. I mean, from the first day students come on campus, that Saturday afternoon, what's he do? He stands in front of Beatty Hall and he teaches everyone Valley will roll. You know, from that day on, everyone knows Ed Leslie.
My dad has always been a really hard worker. He put a lot of time into teaching and grading and tutoring. I remember as a kid, students coming over to the house and he would sit at the dining room table and tutor them. And he was really active in the extracurriculars at Valley.
Well, you know, we tell a lot of people that Ed's as close to Mr. Viking as you can get. You know, Ed loves Missouri Valley College. He always has. He's devoted his basically his whole entire life as an instructor and as an athletic supporter. You know, one of the things about Ed is that, you know, 25 years ago, he kept scorebook for me for the Missouri Valley College men's basketball team. So all through those years, we had conversations about basketball games, and he's just, like I said, he's the epitome of what Valley Athletics really is, as a loyal supporter, a faculty member that knew that there was more than just the outside, you know, the classroom. The co-curricular student, the student and the athlete, was a vital part of Missouri Valley College.
I had him for college algebra when I was in high school, and so around the time of homecoming during the torch run, his whole class period, he didn't even teach college algebra, he just taught the history of the torch run and when it started, and that was really interesting.
In 1958, Ed and some of his buddies decided that they wanted to run the torch from the opposing football team's home, and in that case it ended up being the courthouse at Independence, and that was the first time. Well, following that, as memory serves, then they went to the Tangerine Bowl, and just a bunch of crazy guys who wanted to run a torch in relay fashion from Valley down to Orlando, Florida, 1,258 miles. And back in that day, it was a challenge. Certainly it would be a challenge today, but they just had a great time doing it. They had people along the way who were Valley grads who fed them and took real good care of them, make sure that they were cared for. Since that time, Ed decided that it was something that needed to be a Valley tradition. So they did it every year. The first few times I sat down with him to figure out everything that it took to make it happen. Things like planning out how many teams were needed and how many students on each team, and where this team would start and how long it took them to go their segment of the stretch, and the effort that he put into it mathematically, as well as making sure that the kids were cared for, that they had snacks and fruit and water, and that he was always there with them. He made connections along the way every year with the local police departments. We had a police escort. Sometimes they ran in high traffic areas, so they would have the local police or sheriff come out and guide them through so that the kids were safe. And he just looked after those kids like they were his own. He wanted to make sure that everybody'd be safe and that they had a good time.
He was one of the first people I met, kind of told me a little bit about the community, about the campus, and of course he had that torch run. And I know a lot of people know about the torch run, so we would do interviews on the torch run every year. And when I first came here, that wasn't just around campus. That torch run was from the community of our football team opponent that day. So if it was Evangel, they'd run that torch from Springfield. If it was Culver Stockton, they'd run it all the way from the Mississippi River at Canton. And I was fortunate to be able to be involved in that a couple of times. And we ran through Sedalia, a couple of us, and it was fun. And Ed was there every mile of the way. He put all that together, and we talked about that a lot and what that meant to Valley and what Valley meant to him. It's just a huge part of his life.
That was, how the homecoming festivities began with the lighting of the bonfire and bringing in of the torch, and sometimes that torch was brought from hundreds of miles away, and it everybody on campus was participating in some degree or another, and it just let the team know that they weren't out there by themselves. They were out there representing all of the spirit that all of us had as students at Missouri Valley.
We won the national championships in 2003, and men's wrestling did. And we were traditionally, the women's wrestling team had been starting the deal, and then the guys would come in the middle, and we had some pretty fair runners at that time, so we would always kind of help make up time if somebody was late or whatever. He knew our guys could do that. And if it wasn't us, then it was track if they were involved with it. But that particular year, he was pretty gracious about it. He wanted us to, bring the trophy or bring the torch in, since we had just won the national championships, and he felt that was deserving. It was a big honor, for us to be able to bring it in, and afterwards he told us, he goes, "Your guys are too fast." "What do you mean?" I said, "We're just a bunch of wrestlers." He said, "Yeah, but man, they pick it up and lay it down." He goes, "You must train the heck out of them." I said, "Well, you're only running them about a quarter mile. I normally run them about 7 or 8. I said, "They're pretty happy on about a quarter mile."
And he loved sharing that with people. He was very caring, wanting to make sure every student that came here got an education. And walked away with pride as well.
I was a math major through the 3 years, and he was one of the 2 math professors. He taught all the upper division classes, and he was just a brilliant teacher. He could solve any problem, and a couple of times we used that against him. We'd go to class and be really tired, and we'd ask him about a problem that we had problems with, and he would get up on the board to solve it, and we would get out about half the classes. He'd make sure he solved that problem for us. So he was just that kind of guy. He was competitive. He was never going to walk away without solving a problem, and he could solve any problem. He was a wonderful example to all of us when it came to mathematics.
Well, I remember one time, I think the whole Young Hall was involved in, they had water bombs, balloon water bombs back then, and they were always throwing them out the window or off the 3rd floor or off the little old balcony up there. And I remember one time the dean of men came by in his car, and somebody whipped out a water bomb that went right in his window and lit in his lap. And that was very embarrassing. He never did find out who threw it, though.
Are you confessing to it now, then?
Pardon?
Are you confessing to it now?
Oh, no, I didn't do it.
You didn't do it?
Ed didn't do it. We were all there, but we didn't do it.
Well, up until the last few years, Ed Leslie always had his car. And he would go up and down the sideline after every score, and he'd always get someone with him. I know Heather Troth, the coach's wife, kids. There'd always be someone want to ride with Ed. Now, in the years past, they went all the way around the track. But a couple of times, the opposing fans that sit on the other side really didn't appreciate that. So I think Tom Fife, the athletic director, said, "Ed, let's just stay on our side." And so he goes up and down. Everybody looked forward to that. That was wonderful. You score a touchdown, you knew that Ed Leslie was going to be taking the car up the sideline. That's always fun.
But my favorite story is about Ed's Valley Rally car. That when we first started it, we allowed them to, go around, and once we scored, he would make a full circle around the track.
Fire off the cannon, and he takes a trip. At that time, took a trip around the track.
Now we just have him run in front of the fans, turn around and come back. Well, there's a reason for that. Because, I never thought much about it, but when we scored, he was driving that car all the way around the track. Well, that's right in front of the visitors' seating.
And there's a playoff game. I want to say it was Bethany College.
We had a playoff game with one of the teams out of Kansas, and we were beating them fairly well. And some of the fans over in the Kansas area, I think, had participated in partying, a little pregame, so they were pretty fired up. Well, they weren't overly excited about the idea of every time us scoring, Ed driving his car all the way around a circle with the Valley flag hanging out.
We scored, and we've been scoring fairly often. And he took his trip around, around the far side of the campus. And our football stadium's changed a little bit now, but, went in front of the visitors' side, and a couple of fellas jumped out, and, they putting their hands on the car. First of all, it's an antique, so you want to treat it right.
So Ed come pulling out after the score, waving the Valley flag and driving around. Well, when he got over to the opposite side, there's about 5 or 6 huge fans from the other team in the middle of the road.
And I guess the visiting team blocked it. So he was so mad. And eventually he just backed up and went the other way.
And so Ed honks his horn, and then, but they stopped the car. And so I look over, and people are yelling and stuff. I look over, and there's 4 or 5 guys with their hands on the front of the car, holding Ed from going anywhere. And he's just blaring on the horn,
We were getting after him pretty good, so I think the car had been around a few times. And I think one of their fans who I'm sure was a big fan of their team, but he probably had a little too much celebration before the game, but he decided that he didn't want to see the car anymore. So my understanding is he walked out in the middle of the track and didn't want to move. So I heard about all that afterwards, but I did not see any of it when it actually happened.
I was playing the game, but at the same time, I kind of saw the commotion, what was going on. And I actually later on heard from my boss now, Tom Pfeiffer.
We broke up the little bit of a crowd they had there. We allowed Ed to go on through and then calm down the opposing team's fans.
My job at that time specifically was crowd control over on that side. And when they stopped him, then it was my job to actually get a hold of those guys and, hey, you got to get off. Let it go.
When you were there, it was funny because the look on Ed's face, he was mad. Ed was a pretty easygoing guy, but if you got Ed fired up, he could get fired up. And he was trying to get through and edging them with that car, and they were holding them off, So that was a great day. We won the game, and we sit back and laughed about the blockade that they had.
But he was always doing things for the family too, and always working on a project or building something or fixing something for us. So it was just, I remember him always being really busy and productive and always helping in any way that he can, whether it be at home with the family or at school with students.
Or leave home early in the morning to get ready for his classes. Even though he'd taught classes for years and years and years, he always wanted to be fresh and to come up with new ideas. And his way of relaxing was eating breakfast and doing math calculus problems at the table that the rest of us had no idea what he was doing. But he became involved in everything that was happening on campus. So because we were short on staff, he was teaching 15 hours, but he always had an overload. Always. So there were times when he was teaching 18, 21 hours and tutoring and doing committee work and athletic involvement, and it was just, he was there as long as he needed to be and then some.
I get to know a lot of the students who aren't even in any of my classes because of my association with athletics and participation in other activities, the theater and the music programs and that sort of thing. I like to take in it all.
Something, and I don't know if everybody knows this, but the car for home games, he'd drive around the track. But also when we had away games, he showed up with his car and he would lead the buses out of town and parade them out of town for our away games. And there's some of those mornings late in the year where it's pretty chilly out and he's in an open air car and he's right there, he wouldn't miss it. And, it's just the sacrifice of doing whatever he can for Valley.
Well, he's currently known as the modern day Pop Ferguson, and he's been referred to as Mr. Viking. He, above all others that I can think of, and I try not to be biased, embodies what Valley is. It's the patience of working with our kids, reaching out to them holistically as students, as members of the family, as creating a legacy. He, in his last years before retirement, was teaching grandchildren of students he had taught. So it's never easy to describe someone, but his work ethic was always so strong and undescribable.
I was there. I was in the stands on the floor, actually, and right behind the graduates, and it was very emotional. You could hear it in Bonnie's voice, just the emotion that she had, and just looking around the room and seeing all the students and the reaction that they had to him. He just has always had such an amazing presence and such a connection with the students, even students who never had him. I remember the speaker who spoke at graduation, I think it was George Robinson. He had come to homecoming the fall before, so it was homecoming of 2014, and he had said, he had come up to Dad and said, "I don't know if you remember me," and Dad shook his head and said, "Oh yeah, yeah." And he remembered everybody. He remembers everybody. He has an amazing memory and remembers all of the students he had or didn't have. For him to be honored for all of his years of service, the way that he was, and just to see the overwhelming
Graduated from Missouri Valley College in 1961
acceptance and
with an ABS in mathematics. While at Missouri Valley
adoration that the students and the everyone that was sitting there at graduation, to see their reaction to him getting that honorary doctorate was incredible.
Although Ed relished and was humbly proud of the many awards that he got, he had always hoped for the day that he would be recognized with an honorary doctorate because Pop Ferguson had. And he always wanted to follow in Pop's footsteps. Bonnie came out to our house to let Ed know that that would be happening at graduation. I recall sitting on the back patio with her and Ed when she told him, and it was a very emotional time for us. Had a pact, beyond pact. Graduation, is you can see from the videos that were taken. We personally had friends and family from all over the country come to celebrate the honor. And when he stood to receive his hood,
he was a mathematics professor, director of computing services, and
the entire everybody who was there stood to their feet and cheered. And the cheering was deafening. It was so loud and so congratulatory, and it went on and on and on. And I remember looking at my brother and his wife who flew in from Connecticut, and they've known Ed for over 30 years and admired him greatly. And friends of ours who came from Dallas, Rico Allen, his family, I think there might have been 12, 15 of them. The tears were flowing from not just people we were close to, but students and alums and community members. Just in awe.
Sigma Zeta National Math Science Honor Society.
It
Kappa
was
Mu Epsilon
probably
Math
the
Honorary,
high
and the
point
American Association
of his time with Valley.
He loves Missouri
And
Valley
it was just phenomenal, the accolades and the admiration.
Well, you're no help. You're down there crying in front of me. He is famous for driving his 1929 Model A Henrietta around the football field when we have touchdowns. He's even famous for inciting a slight riot one year when we were in a playoff game. By the virtue of the authority vested in me by the Missouri Valley College Board of Trustees and by the state of Missouri, I hereby confer upon you the degree of Honorary Doctorate of Humane Letters with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereto appertaining. Thank you, dear friend, for your decades of service.
Roll tonight, Valley will roll. Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. Valley will roll tonight, Valley will roll. When the sun goes down and the moon comes up, Valley will roll.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of a storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver song of love. Walk on